In the new Battlefield 2042 video game, I noticed that the primary weapon, the M5A3, is the exact same gun as the US Army's next generation squad weapon 6.8mm prototype that I got to test fire a few months ago. The M5A3 is the SIG Spear. Only a handful of civilians and some military testers have ever fired the SIG Spear in real life, because in real life it's still in the final testing phases. This begs the question, why does EA Games know more about the outcome of this competition than the Department of Defense and the Pentagon? In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your in-game M5A3 to match the real-life military version. We'll compare and contrast the two a little bit, and we'll talk about the video game's influence on the defense industry. You might have already heard the Battlefield 2042 has a new feature that allows you to adjust what kind of attachments you have on your weapon system on the fly without having to respawn. All you have to do is press T. It's very intuitive. This menu pops up that allows you to change optics, swap out barrels, or even change the caliber of the ammo being fired. And why didn't this feature get added like 10 years ago? Why is Battlefield adding it now? The reason I think that is because the menu feels realistic today. It captures the spirit of the near future firearms development, because those features are actually possible today. If Battlefield 2042 had implemented this feature 10 years ago, it might have seemed unrealistic for the series, considering that it's always been kind of somewhat grounded in reality, at least more than Call of Duty. But since they did it in this game now, it feels realistic because real firearms are starting to have these abilities. In reality, you can swap out the NGSW Spear, the M5A3 real-life version. You can swap out the barrel very quickly. You can change the optics quickly. I was shown a demonstration on the next generation weapons how easy it is to change the caliber of their machine gun from a 6.8mm to 6.5 Grendel within a matter of seconds. They could swap out optics just as easily while keeping the zero. With the NGSW, it is technically possible that with a quick barrel and bolt change that you could theoretically switch from a 5.56 to a 7.62 like you do in game. You could attach a grenade launcher to the bottom of the SIG Spear without having to pull the whole thing apart like you did with the M4, which would be impossible to add M203 in the field. It'd be annoying. What I'm saying is the Battlefield menu design feels reasonable because firearms of today and the near future basically already have these abilities. Whereas 10 or 20 years ago, if you tried doing this in a video game, it would have seemed like sci-fi futuristic crap. I'm looking at you, Call of Duty. If you want to set up your in-game M5A3 to match the real-life US Army NGSW, the first thing you'd have to do is go ahead and pick the MAL hybrid 1.5 to 3 times scope. This is the closest in-game approximation to what the next generation fire control system has. It even has a Wi-Fi signal and a battery display in the scope, just like the real-life one has. The main difference here is that the real-life future optic is going to be a variable magnification, so you can zoom anywhere from 1 times to 6 times magnification without having to take your eye off the scope. And it's not just intervals, it's a free moving adjustment. In-game, they are still using an antiquated optic that forces you to press F to switch between the close quarters optic and the magnified one. When that F key works, it's a bug right now. But I understand a lot of these are made for the sake of balancing the gameplay and the in-game fun instead of purely trying to be realistic. This isn't Arma 3 that we're playing here. So the next thing you want to do is switch to the high-powered 20-round magazine. That's going to give you the actual 6.8 by 51mm ammo. When you fire the 6.8mm rounds, you can see the ammo is actually a perfect model of the steel brass hybrid ammo. Look closely at the rounds being ejected and you can see the steel brass base on the cartridge. This is the first video game to have this unique next generation ammo in it. If you're not familiar with it, the steel at the end of what's normally just fully brass case, that steel primer allows the ammunition to be high pressure and the bullets are higher velocity. And this is what lets you use those shorter barrels while maintaining a high velocity. The fact that the Battlefield design team paid that close level of detail to the ammo is honestly incredible. And I didn't even have to pay 20 bucks for a microtransaction to get the authentic NGSW. Outstanding! The 5.56 and the submachine gun ammo doesn't have the hybrid design, which is also true to life. Next, choose the factory barrel because this is the same barrel as the real life one. The extended barrel is also useful in game though to really reach out and touch someone. Once they add the suppressors in Battlefield, this will be an even closer real-life carbon copy of the NGSW. It's actually a lot of fun to use this menu because you can change your strategy based on the mission that you know you'll be heading into. And this is actually a perfect reflection of the US military and how they want future soldiers to be thinking. The SIG Spear is being designed specifically to give future infantry the ability to adapt their weapon on the fly. One more major difference that sticks out to me here is that you can only carry a maximum of like 64 rounds on your kit. It's a 20-round magazine for a total of like 84 rounds. This would be really low in real life. That means you only have 3 magazines in your pouches and 1 in your gun. If you've ever met the gear guy in your platoon, he has like 30 pouches on him. There's no way you would only have 64 rounds. You'll still have this standard loadout of 210 rounds. According to futuregaming.io, the M5A3 has the following in-game stats. The firepower is 55, accuracy 65, range 65, and handling is 42. Now, that obviously doesn't translate to the real world perfectly, but I'll say this about the weapon. When you look at that cartridge, the 6.8mm, the accuracy and the range is going to be incredible. You're gonna be hitting targets out to 800, 900 meters. So those statistics in real life are probably higher. The firepower probably higher than the in-game version. One major change is with the top rail system, which in real life is tan, but in the game, it's black. The real life SIG Spear has canted iron sights that are offset and located on the right side of the weapon, whereas the M5A3 has the iron sights on top of the rail system. I noticed that the Jake Gyllenhaal lookalike on the main screen also seems to like to keep his weapon on fire instead of on safe. That's cool, you can do whatever you want, they're not paying you any royalties. There are what appears to be some glow-in-the-dark night sight spots on the back of the top rail system, which is different than in real life. I didn't see those when I fired it. I didn't notice those on top of the gun, but when I spoke to the SIG design team, they stated that future versions would have more features added to that intelligent rail system. You can notice the bottom rail system on the M5A3 in-game is also different than the real-life one. These are called intelligent rails that run an electrical signal through the Picatinny rail system, so that all of your electronics, all of your optics, they all talk to each other digitally. They're sending each other information. I think the reason for some of these changes that were made is because the M5A3 is supposed to be the SIG Spear like 20 years from now, in the future, after it's undergone some upgrades and changes. This is the 3rd generation of what this prototype gun would look like. This would make sense because the SIG design team mentioned to me that they felt there was plenty of room to upgrade this platform in the future, which is exactly what happened to like the M16 and the M4 over the years, and they came out with the M16A2, the M16A4, just like this gun. Other things that the model got correct is the foldable stock, where you can see where you would pick it up and collapse it, just like in real life. The bolt release, there's a new bolt release next to your finger that they added in-game, that's there too. But the animators, they never use that bolt release, they always do the slapping one. And I get that, the legacy slap on the bolt seems a lot cooler. First thing, when we look at the model of this gun, it's picture perfect. It's a perfect recreation of the real life SIG Spear. The M5A3 and the SIG Spear look exactly alike. I wouldn't be surprised if they got some model information from SIG. It's that on point. It's also possible that they made their own 3D model based on some high definition 2D images out there. They got all of the key distinguishing features correct. So you have the side charging handle, which you never use in game. That's a little bit disappointing. There's also the rear charging handle. They even put the sacrificial nodes on the gun. These are the parts that can be easily replaced if there's too much wear and tear. When you shoot people in game, they go down in like 2 or 3 rounds, which seems realistic to me, especially if you're shooting at me, you go down in like 1 round. Yeah, I might be a gamer, but I'm not a great one. Remember to subscribe to the channel. I do weekly military rundowns like this video, and I could do more video game to real life comparisons if you like it. Let's talk about the animations. The reload animation is exactly how the trainers at SIG taught me to reload in real life with the M5A3. I'm guessing they looked at footage of the NGSW Spear being fired and they copied the movements exactly. The animation for weapon sway perfectly captures the real life weight of the gun. I like how when you run, the gun is held up next to your head like how a cool guy would. It's nice to see Battlefield copying what works from Call of Duty. Lord knows they do it to Battlefield all the time. It's clear to me that the animators, 3D modelers all did a ton of research on the in-game M5A3 animations to make it as accurate as possible. And the reason I say this is because they recreated the handling to reflect how it handles in real life, when you move a mouse around to find targets, it genuinely feels like how it did when I was moving it around in real life. There's a little bit of delay, there's a little bit of weight to the real life firearm. When you shoot, the recoil is reflective of the real life M5A3 when fired on single fire and when not looking down the sights. Because in this video game, if you're looking down sights and you're firing fully automatic, they really reduce the amount of recoil just for the sake of making the game fun. And that's the main priority of Battlefield 2042, is that it's fun, not so much that it's perfectly realistic. The rate of fire does feel true to real life though. You can switch from automatic to single fire, which I sometimes do just to get that realistic gameplay. When you fire on single fire, your rate of fire is similar to how fast I could accurately pull the trigger in real life. Obviously, Jake Gyllenhaal, the lookalike here, is in better shape than me. He can shoulder the weapon better than me. Plus, he's had 20 years to familiarize himself with the M5A3, whereas I only had 2 hours. There, is that enough excuses for my shitty shooting? So I noticed something else while playing the game. Not only was the M5A3 a perfect representation of the next generation squad weapon, it was heavily researched, the Ranger robot dog and the unarmored scout vehicle are both a major part of the real US military's future plans. It's always fascinating to me when I see the design philosophies of the real life military trickle down into video game culture. And I think the Battlefield series has always been the best at capturing those changes as they happen in real time. I think it's fair to say that the opposite is also true, where video games have had a fairly big impact on the military community. These two industries are starting to find they have more and more overlap. I know when I deployed to Iraq, we had people bringing Xboxes. That was the priority, because when you have downtime, you want to be able to just play a couple rounds of Call of Duty. For instance, you see the new augmented reality training that the US Army does. It has its roots in video games. Wargaming strategy simulators have been a big factor in military planning since like the 1980s, when the Army used old text simulators. The heads-up display systems of the IVAS, those are clearly taking a cue from the video game industry. In Battlefield 2042, and even going back to other Battlefield games, there's always been a mini-map which shows you where your team is and where the enemy is. And I think that the defense industry saw how useful those kind of things could be with the IVAS systems and with these other GPS systems. The ability to mark enemies visually on a heads-up display would be valuable in real life. Night vision goggle technology that's appeared in video games years ago is now a real life thing. So I refuse to believe that the defense industry hasn't been inspired by a video game once or twice. Whether this is a good thing or not is not really my lane. I'll leave that up to the armchair generals in the comment section. The Army wants your regular grunts to have their field of vision to be completely cluttered with annoying reminders to go to the objective that the commander told you to go to. Battlefield has been my favorite video game series. I've been playing it since I was in high school, back when it was BF2042. So I'm excited for the full release next month, but this all begs the question of where are the other competitors in this video game? Will the True Velocity Lone Star Bullpup NGSW and the Textron NGSW end up making an appearance? Because it'd be cool to see the white plastic ammo cartridges flying out of these futuristic weapons. Certainly by 2042 we'll have gotten those technologies to work, no? What if one of those wins the bid? Will that make Battlefield 2042 literally unplayable? On Monday, I'm going to be going to the AUSA event in Washington, D.C., so follow me on Instagram at CappyArmy, because I'm going to be live streaming all of the new tanks, robots, weapons, and equipment. This is where they're bringing all of the future defense technologies that are going to be setting the pace for the next 20 years. I'm your host, Chris Cappy, the Average Infantryman. You're watching Task and Purpose, and I'll see you guys next week.